Hi. An important part of the writing process for me is getting someone to critique my work. My little goblin brain is too biased. I need someone who's not connected to my story to get an objective view, someone to point out things that I would have never noticed. I need people who have different life experiences so that they can tell me how they perceive the work that I made. There is nothing I love more than life than the people I value pointing out my every flaw. Anyway, I love my CPs. They help me a lot, and this is how I've chosen them so that hopefully you can set up your own standards. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about Evan and Ellis, so I'll be linking their stuff below. And these are some things that I look for in a CP, and I'll be using Evan as an example for a lot of these. My first one is that I need to actually like them outside of writing. I know I've had my fair share of critiquing with writers that I really do not like. Most of them have been from like in-person writing groups. Since I'm choosing a lot of my CPs online, I get to choose who I like. I would prefer to have a friend read my work. Then I'm with that friend, I can have like a bigger amount of trust in that person, which leads me up to my next point, trust. My next point is that I need to be able to trust them. I need to be able to know that I can trust my CP to give me honest feedback, to tell me if they actually liked it or if they really hated it and why. Evan has no problem telling me if a scene is lackluster because he knows that I won't take offense to it, and I trust that he is not trying to be offensive or rude about it. Next one is similar writing experience. I'm a young writer, so I make a note of getting other writers to critique my work that are also young. I mean, on top of that, I'm more likely to get along with them because we have similar life experiences if we're both young. We also have similar writing experiences and similar writing skill level. I would never ask someone who is an accomplished author who's like New York Times bestselling to critique my work, because although they would be benefiting me, I would not be a huge benefit to them, and the critique partner relationship should be beneficial both ways. Lastly, I really appreciate getting critique partners who are skilled in areas where I lack. Currently, I am learning how to world build, and someone that I know who is really good at world building is Evan. He really knows where to add the small details to exemplify a bigger picture. In my writing, he can tell me when I should elaborate on a scene or when I should cut it short. I know that if he's talking about world building, that I can trust his judgment. Okay, so now we're going to point out the critique that I have received from Evan and Ellis. So we're going to talk about what they did right and then why I really appreciate these types of comments. First, I really appreciate a CP who doesn't just point out the negative. Really value when a CP is able to point out the positive and tell me what I am doing right so that I can further improve on the skills I'm already good at. I also really appreciate when I can tell a CP is getting into the action or narrative of my book. Okay, so this is the most important one. This is why I love Evan as a CP, and we are going to dissect his critique that he gave me and why it is such a good and valuable critique. I understand that this is supposed to be an emotional moment, but I don't care about Blessica. For the most part, she's just moved from room to room and described the people that she's looking at. The most of her personality that I've seen is that she's snarky, I guess, and wants to eat the rich. I have no sense of her skills or even that she is worthy to be head datu. If this were her third chapter and the previous two had set up Blessica and shown me her worth and her strength and set up the strong conviction that she was going to be head Natu, I would be more emotionally invested. But I just met Blessica. I don't know her, and for all I know she sucks at her job, but is too entitled to realize that. This would be like if a coworker came up to me and told me that they didn't get a promotion. Yeah, I get why it sucks, but at the end of the day, I don't care, and I'm probably going to forget about it as soon as I clock out. And no, I'm not saying to go back and insert 2 chapters before this, but make sure Blessica's personality shines through. Regale me with her achievements, convince me that she deserves to be head datu. Convince me that she is, in fact, the most qualified for this. And don't just do that with her, do it with her brother too. Why should I care that he's head datu and not Blessica? Well, that's fine and dandy for her, but I never got the sense that Jacinto didn't. He just didn't seem to acknowledge it as a possibility, and if that's the point, that needs to be set up better. We all saw this coming, that's why it's a trope, but it doesn't really mean anything because I don't feel emotional weight on either side. If Jacinto didn't want to be head datu, this needs to be set up. If he does want to be head datu but is resigned to the fact that it's not going to happen, that needs to be set up as well. You can't just throw a reader into family drama, broken dreams, and unfair treatment when they've given no time to care about any of that. That's a lot. So let's break it down. Okay, first I want to acknowledge Evan's tone. Evan's tone is incredibly caring. You can tell that he's not being condescending or rude or talking down to me. He's seen a flaw in my writing and wants to point it out. I can tell that he's pointing it out because he cares about my writing and wants the best for me, not because he has a grudge against me in particular. When he's talking about how his co-worker got a promotion and he didn't feel much of anything, that is making a comparison that I can understand. That really puts into perspective how he views the chapter as a fellow writer, but it also makes me realize what a reader would think. He then clarifies that he doesn't expect me to write 2 more chapters before this chapter to establish Blesska's character. He makes sure that he and me are on the same page. And then he tells me what I should fix. He's very explicit about what I did wrong and points it out with a fine-tooth comb. On the surface, he could have said Blesska's motivations were confusing and left it at that. But he doesn't. He tells me why I should establish Blesska's character more, because it fails to get the reader invested. He proves to me that I need to fix this and points out why I can't just brush away his comment. Finally, but most important, he doesn't fix it for me. He didn't try to rewrite it. He respects my voice and that we're going to have different writing styles, especially with the different genres we're writing. He tells me what I should fix, but he leaves the dirty work to me. If Evan just rewrote this whole section, I would cut him from being a CP, because that would mean that he would be too controlling to respect my voice as an author. He understands that this is my chapter, and he knows his place. His place is to see my work succeed. That's just an example of a great critique, but now we're going to talk about how I critique. I'm going to be mostly referencing Ellis's work because he is the one I'm critiquing most recently. I won't be sharing the text, the document, obviously. I won't be sharing any actual criticism because I feel like the criticism that I share is for the author's eyes only. But I will be sharing some of the funnier ones, some of the more lighthearted ones, the positive ones. Okay, so first things first, I read the document once, and I leave my first reactions on the margins in the comments. And I feel like me and Ellis have a relationship more where he can tell what is my first reactions as opposed to actual critique. If you're just starting out with critiquing, or you're critiquing a new author, you might want to be more explicit about what is your first reactions or not, because you haven't established that writer-friend relationship. If I had nothing but criticism, that's a critique all on its own. But even if that does happen, I make sure to put a positive spin on it. I try to say, well, this chapter does have potential, because if it's not good right now, it can't be good in the future. If you're just looking for the negatives, that's not good. You should be looking for the positives in a piece as well, because pointing out the positives doesn't just serve to inflate the writer's ego, it's also showing the author what they are doing right and what skills they already have so that they can further build upon it. This is another thing. I always like to add a little bit of humor in my critique. I love it when I can laugh at my friends' comments in the margins, depending on the subject matter, obviously, but depending on most things, I like to make a joke. And there are plenty of times where I have a bias and I need to tell the author so they immediately know to take my criticism with a grain of salt. So whenever I read something with romance, I always tell the author, hey, I'm on the ace spectrum. This feels really disjointed to me, but that may be because I am just ace. Take my criticism with a grain of salt. And it really helps the writer know what they should be focusing on and what they can kind of consider a little bit more whether a comment is actually useful or not. Now, I don't want to share any actual critique because I believe that the critique I share is for the writer's eyes only. What I will say is that most of my critique does follow me saying what is wrong and why it is wrong. I also make sure to never tell my CPs how to fix an issue, or I never fix the issue for them. I suggest you find a stronger verb, or consider maybe cutting out that paragraph. Something I think I'm pretty good at is admitting when I don't know. Because sometimes you just read a sentence and it doesn't feel right, and you don't know how to describe it. It's just when you read it out loud, it feels weird. It feels disjointed. And it's okay to say you don't know how to fix it, and rather, you should be saying when you don't know how to fix it. A writer would much rather appreciate your honesty rather than a lie. I read it once through the perspective of a reader, and then I read it again through the perspective of a writer. I am going to be adding a little section. I call it a critique summary, pretty much summarizing all the critique I had about the piece. This is something I like to add, and you will notice I structure it in a very specific way. I structure it in what they call the compliment sandwich. I compliment, critique, compliment. I do this so that, one, the writer feels like there's more good than bad, even if that good is only potential. The last thing the author reads of that critique on a positive note, because getting critique on your work is hard. Or so I've heard. For someone like me who is very objective when it comes to taking criticism, it is hard for me to put myself in someone else's shoes. And I send the chapter back, text my CP, say, hey, I just finished chapter 4. And I also send them lots of cute emojis because getting critique on your work is hard. You have to put the cute emojis on there. That is non-negotiable. Okay, so we covered a lot today. We covered what I look for in a CP, what I expect from a CP, and then how I critique. That's like 3 video topics in one day. So y'all better feel grateful. Subscribe down below. I post videos every Monday at 5, and all of my social media links are in the description. Thank you so much for watching. Okay.